Hey guys, thanks for being with me and cut your lunchtime short. I really appreciate that. Um, why I'm really excited to be here on stage right now is that I'm really eager and curious to find out how long-term engagement works. So I think if we look at different services, products, and everything around us, it's always built for how to get the first customer, how to get the customer first, and then he has to deal with everything. So think about it. We have amazing advertisement so that someone finally buys our product, service, whatever, and then once he got the product, sometimes he only get a very bad written white and black manual book. So it's not really engaging anymore, interesting or nice experience. So actually, I think it should be the other way around because everyone agrees that the loyal customer is the more important one, and also when we're talking about the customer lifetime value, that it's much better to keep the already earned customer than to get new ones. And so this is what I'm really interested about, and this is why I'm so focused on game thinking, or gamification, or however you call it. It's more about behavior psychology, and the question is, why are we so engaged in different activities like games, like sports, like hobbies, whatever? Because if you think back, these are the activities, and of course some others too, but let's stay with these three main categories, that we are always doing intrinsically, and we are staying loyal to these activities. On the contrary, even if it's getting harder to do these activities, so let's say you're good in sport and you play another league, so you get a more difficult league, you're still engaged and try to overcome that challenge now. And so this is why I think that game thinking, the psychology behind why games are so engaging and especially keeping people playing the game is really interesting, and I think we can learn a lot from that, and then transfer that in any kind of industry, any kind of product, service, or process, business process. So also for work design, job design, it's really interesting. Okay, so what I'm doing over the last 10, 12 years is actually, it's an experience that I had myself when I was sitting in school. I was in a boarding school, and so my parents had a really difficult time with me there because every year they had to go to the teachers, and they told them, okay, he's not engaged, Roman can't sit still, he can't learn vocabularies, he's not focused, he always wants to go the easy way, and so on. And they were right. That was the case in school. But the point is that the time out of school, when I did sports or had my games or whatever, I was able to sit down for 10 hours to play a game, totally. I could learn vocabulary or text in the theater for 3 hours monologue. I played handball professional, so I really was into, okay, I could stay focused, and if it becomes harder, I could go through all the stuff, but I just wasn't able to do that in school. And so why is that the case? And why is that the case almost all over the world, that people are they can sit down, they are focused, they're energized, they are tackling problems, they want to be challenged in some activities, but not in others. And I think this is what we are talking about today. So what is the talk about? I already had to tell it once in order to get applied here at the
Hey guys, from the Product Management Festival, greetings from the sun. No, it's not really sunny, but anyway, greetings from Zürich. I would love to be part of the Product Management Festival because I would like to challenge a little bit what we think about user-centered design so far. I would love to enrich it with the thinking of player-centered design. I would love to show how to use different kind of tools to introduce player-centered design into product development. And I also would love to show how that can have a positive impact, not just on product development, but also on marketing, sales, and different kind of departments. By thinking about player-centered design in product development, I believe that it's possible to create better and more lasting connections between the product itself and its users, and that can also help to bypass competition.
Okay, so that will be our outline for today. So let's go straight into that. So often when we're talking about developing products nowadays in UX or usability design, whatever, it's all about, oh, we have to do it in a human-centered way. So this is already the first challenge that I want to give. If we really think about that, most often it's only about how can we make a product so easy and can design the friction out of the system so that it's easy for the human to adjust to the system, to the product, to the service, or whatever, so that he will do what we want him to do in the easiest and best way. And if you think about it, that's not really human-centered, because it's still centered around the features of the product. We only want to make it easier for the guys, for the people using it. And this is already the first learning about behavior psychology. Everything that you, or most stuff that you experience as being easy, is not really worth your time. So everything that, think about it, if you're playing a game, it's always about challenge yourself. It's always about how to solve a problem. As soon as a game would be very easy and you don't have to solve a problem anymore, you would quit the game and you look for another thing. So this intrinsic motivation to stay motivated with a product is what I'm really looking at. And if we think about UX nowadays, most often, and usability design and so on, we are violating this #1 rule to create intrinsic motivation to use our product and service, and so also we are violating the principles of loyalty. So just to make that clear, the definition, it's a very general one, I know, but if we're talking about usability, it's always about make it really efficient, design the restrictions out of the system, easy to go from point A to point B. And if we think about what games are doing, and also sports, or even your hobby, think about your hobby. You are creating the rules around your hobby. And even you are saying that if you achieved one thing in your hobby, whatever your hobby is, let's say, I don't know, collecting stamps or whatever, you are going to make it more difficult for you the next time, because it's just boring to do the same thing all over again. And so if you think about the difference between UX design and game design, it's really that game designers are looking for how can we design new challenges into the system, and not how can we make it as easy as possible. And it's probably contrary to what we think about when we think about creating these products or services. We think, okay, what's the problem? How can we make it easy for the people to solve it? It's totally fine, no question about that. That has its purpose. And there are some activities where it's really just about that. But if you want to create long-term loyalty without always the necessity to bribe people to stay with us, like the typical loyalty programs that we know, we really have to think about, okay, where is the intrinsic motivation coming from? And I think this sentence really sums it up. That's the thinking that you need to have in order to design intrinsic motivating and engaging in the long-term activities. Okay, because this is really not what you want to have. Everyone who played Super Mario knows what I'm talking about. You want to have the challenge from starting from level 1 and go through all the levels so that you finally are able to save the princess. And you want to know that you worked very hard to do that. In other words, you want to know that you became better in order to do that. You knew the rules, you found the secret stuff, you were able to do the controls very well, you know the physics in the game and so on. That's just a very easy example, but that's what I'm talking about. Okay, so the question is, why are people getting hooked in games? What is really the principle that makes something getting hooked, or keeping you hooked? The point is actually we are designing most stuff around that. So the best example is when we're talking about classic loyalty programs, for example. Or also about classic, I don't know, software, or even social networks, whatever. We always have this trigger, this push notification, or someone telling us to do something, or as I said, in loyalty programs, we have the advertisement telling, hey, if you buy now, you get double the points, whatever. Then we have the action, and normally there it already starts. We try to design the action as easy as possible so that you're open to perform it. Just one click behavior, for example, or it's just a little bit money, just pay the money, whatever, and then we get the feedback. Okay, here's your product, here are your points, here's the next level, whatever. So if you think about games, and if you want, the point is, if I would ask you to design a game for the guy sitting next to you, natively you would do it right. Natively you would take whatever I give you, that you need to buy to build the game, and then you try to find a challenge that someone has to overcome. So it's not just about the trigger, the action, the feedback. The one thing that's being added in intrinsic motivating product, services, or processes is personal investment. Sorry, it's in German, but you know what I mean. Personal investment. What I mean by that is it's not money. Of course, money can be the same thing, but it's most often about time and effort that you're putting into something. I don't know, do you know the IKEA effect? Have you heard about that? Yeah, psychology behavior. So the point is, if you put time and effort into something to build it up, at the end, you value it much higher. Even if it's from an objective point of view, totally crap. But you like it more because you invested all the time. That's the reason why people are playing games like World of Warcraft or whatever for 10 years and they are not switching. Of course, there are other games that they like also and they want to try out. Better narratives, better stories, better technology, better hardware, better graphics, whatever. But the point is they already invested so much time into it that it would be just stupid to quit it because then it would have been wasted. So that's the psychology hook. And everything, and the interesting thing about that is if we're talking about the classic loyalty stuff, for example, if you want to create long-term engagement, we have these loyalty programs or incentives in companies if we're talking about long-term engagement for employees and so on. The point is these are extrinsic rewards and you get used to it. So they are powerful in the beginning and they're becoming less powerful as over the period of time. But if we are talking about the hook model here, so where you're investing effort into something, as more effort you're investing in it, as higher your connection, or as better and deeper your connection with the product, the service, whatever you're doing gets. And so that's the difference that I really like, because here we are talking about midterm to long-term engagement, and we are talking about creating intrinsic motivation, or at least intrinsic rewards. The advantage is that for extrinsic rewards, so like money, stuff, discounts, whatever, it's costly. And as we get used to it, you have to pay more and more and more to keep the things running. So that's the difference between how games, sports, and hobbies are actually creating long-term engagement and loyalty, and what most of us think we should do to create long-term engagement. So as I said, trigger, action, feedback. Here's the discount, perfect. And now let's trigger him again. The interesting thing here is as soon as you're experiencing the investment part, let's go back to Super Mario. As soon as you have finished level 1, you want to get started to play level 2. You know, okay, I earned it, I unlocked it. I learned how to finish level 1. Now I want to use my new earned skills, controlling how the rules work and whatever, in order to progress in level 2. And you already know that that won't be enough. Again, you have to learn more in order to be so that you are able to finish level 2 successfully. So the trigger comes internally and not from the outside. Again, another advertisement. Hey, but now you're getting triple the points if you buy something or whatever. So this is one principle. Another principle, if we are talking about intrinsic motivation, is that we have intrinsic desires. And these are the 4 main ones. The point is, if you think back about what you're doing voluntarily, most often these activities are satisfying, fulfilling these intrinsic desires, most often. And from my point of view, the most important one is mastery. Because our brain is built to learn. It's a pattern-seeking engine. It's always looking for what's the pattern, what can I make with the pattern. The brain can only do 2 things if you break it down, really, if you make it simple. It can learn totally new stuff, or it can deepening already learned stuff. Okay? That's the active part of our brain. And this is what our brain always wants to do. So no matter what you're doing, even if we're talking about purpose, everyone is talking about purpose. You need a purpose in your job. You need a purpose. What's the purpose of the product, of the service? What does it solve, blah, blah, blah. That's important, no question about that. But the point is, even if you have found something that gives you the purpose to do it, to use a software, or just your job is giving you the purpose or whatever, you always want to become even better in achieving that purpose, in doing whatever you have to do within the context of the purpose. So it's always, from my point of view, about mastery. And the third part is connected to the mastery part, for example, is the path to mastery, call it. So it's always about how are you acting when you're getting started to do something. So if you're a novice, a newbie, you have no clue what to do. And then how is someone using your product service already for 10 years? So he's the expert. And the gap in between gives you the opportunity to create an amazing journey for the people that are just using the product for the first time, or the process, or the service. Okay? And so this way, if you use this kind of principles, you're already getting started to think like, let's say game design a little bit. Okay, so the path to mastery, the interesting thing here is that most often people are using something and they're using it for the good, they're achieving something, but sometimes it's difficult to see that. Okay, so sometimes, another case is that often people in companies, the second most reason why people are quitting or are not using a product anymore, such as, it's not really working anymore like in the beginning, or I'm stuck here, I have to leave to go somewhere else. And the point is, most often that's not really the case, but they achieve it, experience it like that. So by creating a path to mastery with different kind of milestones, you are designing also in a way that people are getting the feedback for progressing. And this is what creates the emotional connection, because they are doing all the work to become better, to use the product in the best way. But actually they are connecting it with you as a brand, and they say, hey, thanks to the brand, I'm getting better and better and better. So that's the perceived value behind that. How can you get started? The point is, in the beginning, if you already have a product or a service, it makes sense to break it down to see all the different elements. And so, and then at the end, I will explain how it works. And then at the end, you're building it up together. So everything that you just broke down, the different elements, then you use that to design a path to mastery in it, for example, and then you're building it up, building it together again to achieve something, for example, like a progress tree that we all know actually. So I don't know who's using Duolingo here, or Bubble, language apps, language learning apps. They are using that very successfully. So I will say in a minute what's the advantage of that. Okay, let's break it down. Let's take the Super Mario example again. If you think about Super Mario as an already finished product, whatever you have or service, and now you have to make it more game-like, you would break it down. So what we do is we look at all the activities, the services or the products, and break them down until we get to the core element, the one at the bottom. The core element of Super Mario is jump and run. That's the core activity, not element, core activity, sorry. The thing is, everything else, collecting coins, killing enemies, finding hidden chambers, whatever, getting the flower, it's only so make it more complex so that different kind of people have different kind of variations, but also it's to become even better in jump and run. And none of these other activities are violating your core activity of jump and run. So everything you have, every product, every service, every game has this core activity. And if you can design a path to mastery, at least in this core activity, by the help of the other activities, for example, then you're already on the right track. Okay, so that's an example of a game. I think it's easy to understand that. Let's take another example. If we are talking about breaking it down for photography. So I don't know, but a lot of people are doing photography. So, and what's the core mechanic, core activity of doing photography? Point and shoot. And everything else, to know the settings of the camera, the filter, the lenses, whatever, is just an add-on to become even better in this point and shoot stuff. But if you're not able to perform point and shoot in the beginning, everything else doesn't matter. Okay? And so this way you can break it down. And it's very interesting if you look at already built products, services, or jobs, or processes, whatever, to find to find out what really is the core activity, and then what are all these side activities that are supporting that, because normally we never thought about that. So the important part to do that, to create this path to mastery and to find these core mechanics and so on, is to think about the user himself. So we have these personas, everyone probably knows that already, but the difference here is that we're not just talking about personas per se, so that he is more the social guy and so on. And in this particular context, he wants to solve that kind of problem. When we're thinking about game-like behavior, we are also looking at the maturity of someone. So that means that in the beginning, if you're new to something, you're totally different kind of desires than if you're using it already for 10 years. In the beginning, you want to have these fast achievements. You know how to use something. You want to have the feedback that it was the right decision to buy the product, to hire the service, or to be hired by the company, whatever. You want to have these fast confirmations that, okay, that was a good job. But if you're already using it for 10 years, of course, you don't need that kind of satisfaction anymore. You're looking for totally different kind of stuff. More the social one, exploration one, and so on. Okay? But this is how you can get started. And we have developed our own software to build that up and to create some kind of posters around personas where we really have defined these different kind of maturity stages connected to features with our product and so on. Okay, In the next case, we have these milestones. We have this path to mastery with its milestones. So we found out, okay, what's the core activity and how's the core activity looking as a beginner and as an expert. And then you can also take all the other kind of activities and adjust the path to mastery to that. And so you're getting a very complex activity at the end, but that you can break down and then get started designing it step by step by step by step. But at the end, you see that sometimes an activity or a process or a product that in the beginning was very simple now becomes much more complex. And that's not a bad thing, as we remember when we are talking about long-term engagement, because that means you also have a lot of different opportunities to help people to become better, to make them better, to make them badass, as the Americans say. And then if at the end, we are going back to the progress tree. So the progress tree, is a very simple mechanical element, actually. But why is it so important? Because it tells you different kind of stuff. The first thing is, every time, so if you think back about Duolingo, you have these progress trees, for example, or when you're playing games or whenever, you see the progress tree and you see immediately what you have already achieved until today. And this is the psychology hook that tells you, oh, it was worth to do that. And it tells you also, you put already a lot of time in it. So the hook model comes back again. The second thing is that it tells you, hey, there are much more different opportunities to do. Let's go back to the example for photography. If you have a progress tree for photography, you see that, okay, I have different kind of branches where I can specialize. I have the lens specialization, I have the lighting, the point and shoot, settings, I even have Photoshop, whatever. Everything together makes me a better photographer. And so the thing is that if people see that, oh, there are much more opportunities to go, and I can decide where to go, it creates this kind of autonomy. It's not the product is telling me exactly what to do. Because the point is that if you have a really challenging problem and you get a product, and the product helps you by telling you what to do step by step by step, solving the problem, from a rational point of view, it's pretty fine. You have solved the problem, perfect. But from an emotionally and psychology point of view, there is no satisfaction in that because the people say, oh, I just did what I was told to. And everyone here in the audience knows exactly that's not a nice feeling. Only if you finish something successfully and you know exactly that it was about your decisions, how to do something, how to use something, you have the satisfaction of yeah, I did it. And because of the way how I did it, I decided to do it this way, or to use the resources another way. So it becomes much more individually. There's a difference between what science knows from a psychology point of view and what business does. We are not these rational mammals, but unfortunately, most often we are building product for the rational mammals. That's okay. We have to create rational value, but we may never forget that people are only acting in an emotional way and then try to argue about that it was right to do it this way in a rational way. So what we can do then is we have created all the different path to masteries for all the different activities that we have broken down, and then we are building them up together into a big progress tree, for example. And the third element, sorry, I forgot that I didn't tell you about progress trees. So the first one is you see what you have already done and achieved and how much time you put into something, how much effort. The second one is it creates the sense of autonomy because you think you have the feeling of being in control and going away like you want. And the other thing is that a progress tree, most often if it's done right, it tells you always that, oh, there's much more to do. In Duolingo, for example, you have these gray spaces on the bottom. It's not colored yet, so you know, oh, you still have to unlock it. And this unlocking is such a powerful tool because you always think it's because of you it got unlocked. So it's not that there's a new feature coming up because you did an update, a software update or whatever, but now there's a new feature coming up or unlocked because of the skills that you just developed. And another point is, if there's something like a bonus or a reward or whatever, access to a new feature, we value it much higher if we had to work for that as if we would have gotten it on a plate or whatever. If it's too easy, it's not really worth our time. Okay, so in the outline I told you that we will also look at what other kind of departments or areas can benefit from that kind of thinking. The first one is that If we are, okay, sorry, the point, too fast. The point is that if you unlock stuff, this is what I just said, you think that, okay, you worked hard for it to develop. And so if your program becomes better, if your software becomes better, whatever, it's about you, not because of someone else who decided in the design phase that it has to come now. So if you think about, I don't know, who's using Adobe software, for example? Okay, so me too, and it's really, really complex, right? So we are overwhelmed. The point is we would be much more satisfied with the complexity of the system if you would have an easy onboarding system, get started easily with just a new features, and the way how we use the basic features decides what kind of new feature is being unlocked. Of course, we have paid for that, so we can always switch it off because we paid for it, so we want to have access to all these features. But it's really interesting how people value that kind of onboarding. So that's amazing for branding because then you're getting better and you are thankful for the company, for the brand, so that you became better by making it harder for you to go forward, to progress. The second part is that if you're working hard for something, you're much more likely to talk about that, to tell others about that, because you're proud about it. And so if we're talking about mouth-to-mouth marketing or whatever, recommendations everyone is talking about, this is also a feature that's really, really powerful. So amazing tool for branding and also for loyalty. So IKEA effect, I already said it, that creates this kind of, I worked hard for that, so I have to stay with the company. So there are some amazing experience right now going on with loyalty programs in the hotellerie, whatever, where they exactly did that, where they stopped only giving points or discounts for the next visit if you have already spent 10 nights or 12 or whatever. But now, if you have spent 10 or 12 nights, you have to do something in addition in order to be able to progress. Okay, that's goes too deep to tell it. So there's but the example, you can Google it up. It's there's a very interesting hotel called Prince Luitpold Bad. It's in the Allgäu, and they did exactly that. So, but I can tell you the story after that if you want to. So this is really amazing about increasing the customer lifetime value, because you have the starting point, and then sometimes you also say, okay, now I learned something, now it really makes sense because I finished this kind of software, the basic software successfully. Now I would be stupid if I don't buy the upgrade or if I don't get the next one. Okay? So it's a nice, instead of selling the most complex and advanced package at once, and then people are getting overwhelmed, or they don't even if they go through all the stuff, they don't really value it. You create this path to mastery in the beginning, and they value the progress for themselves. They are thankful to you as a brand to help them to become better. And then, of course, it just makes sense to get the next feature to go on. So it's a very interesting way to increase customer lifetime value. This is one of the most contrary, but one of the most effective way to think about that. So if it's easy to get started, we design the friction out of the system, it's of course easier for someone to do the first step. But then the problem is, and this is what we are already very good at all over the world. How can we make it easier and easier and easier and easier? But the point is, as soon as we have someone, if we connected with someone with our product or service, we have to get rid of the easiness over time, because the way how the customer evolves, the product also has to evolve with him. Just imagine the point if you would buy a car. So think back if you got your first car, new car. The first 2 weeks, probably amazing, as long as you had the smell, you tested all the different kind of buttons perhaps, you tried to find out, okay, what can I do, how can I connect it with my smartphone, whatever is possible, and then after 2 weeks you have found everything, and then you get used to it. But now imagine that because of particular behavior, how you drive or whatever, 6 months later, there's a new feature unlocked, and suddenly you have the experience again of, oh, there's something new, let's go on. And we know that often if you are thinking about, okay, I have to buy the next car, and you are thinking about, should I get the same brand again? You think about your after-buy experiences. And if we stop, and if we don't stop, so that's the point. We should really start to take much more focus on the after buying experience by, for example, creating this path to masteries, helping the people to become better and using our products and so on, so that we can increase the likelihood that they stay with our brand. And the last part, by introducing the path to mastery, so by letting them getting started easy, like in a game. It's so easy to play level 1 in the first place. Why? Because the best way to get this hook engagement, the hook feeling. And so, but after you have learned something, I want you to become better, so I increase the difficulty. We always think about that people want to have it easy, they want to be rewarded at the end, this is what motivates us. And that is just not true. Science knows that. The point is that we want to go out smarter as we went in. So there's a lot of stuff being done with my students. Sometimes I'm playing a game. They are playing a race car game all together, so versus each other. And they also have this feature ghost or transparent self. Do you know that? So this is the feature if you finish the first round in the race car track, and then you're starting the second one, your own self as a transparent card from the first with the first performance of the first track is riding next to you. And so you see exactly, did you become better or not? The interesting thing is that if someone wins all the time against all the other people in the room, he's the best one, he's number 1 in the leaderboard. And he realizes that. And then he says, okay, perhaps I'm just as so good because the others are not good enough. And then if you tell this guy, okay, we're doing that for 2 more hours, he's getting bored. He said, oh no, please. Even if he's always winning, okay? But if you're talking to the guy who's coming in last, always, he's on the bottom of the leaderboard. But he realizes that sometimes he finished before his transparent self. That's the first one who says, okay, let's go on. Over the next 2 hours, I'm getting better, I'm getting the next one. It's always about personal progress. So don't think about how can you make it easy, how can you reward someone, because we always, and this is what science really knows, is we always look about dopamine. We think dopamine is the reward molecule, and if we get a reward, dopamine is being flashed inside the brain, and we say, hey, yippee. What we don't know, or what science knows, is that actually dopamine is being released in anticipation of finishing something successfully. And this changed the whole game, because suddenly it's about the activity itself, it's about the anticipation of finishing successful. So as long as you think, hey, you are in control and probably you will finish it successfully, if the ratio is perfect between the problem and your skills, you're happy. As soon as you realize, oh, we have 5 minutes left and in 2 minutes I'm finished, it's easy, no dopamine anymore. So design for the activity itself and don't try to create reward systems or make it too easy for someone and then just put some kind of badges in all the software stuff that you can see around right now, just to make something that's already boring incentivized. Because a shitty product incentivized is still shitty. Okay, thanks.